Ruby. So this is my second attempt at recording this lesson. The last time I did it, I did not check my microphone interface and there was no sound. So I'm redoing this, and because it's a second draft, it'll be ideally a lot shorter and a little quicker for you to get through. So in our last lesson, we talked about the components and the sequence of a classical argument. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to review what those different elements are, what that sequence is, and then we're going to look at a way that you can pre-write through visual organization. So the components and sequence of a classical argument are made up of these different pieces. We have the exordium, which is our introduction, the opening or the hook. So this is the part of the essay where you get your audience interested in what you have to say. I'm going to go over 8 ways to introduce an essay very shortly, so you can have some more information in terms of ways to write that exordium. The narratio is the context or background of the topic. So this is where you give your audience some background understanding of what it is you're going to be talking about. You contextualize it for them. So you talk about it how in terms of what it means within the time frame that you're talking about. What are the events that are occurring surrounding it that help contextualize it? What's the time period? So this is really important in order to help write a really coherent logical argument. The propositio and the partitio, these are the different parts of the claim. Now, the propositio is where you basically make your one sentence thesis statement, right? This is your claim. The partitio is where you break down what your different reasons are that you're going to use in terms of developing your argument as you move through your essay. So we talked a lot about this at the beginning of last semester. We didn't use these terms, but I did ask you in some of those first progress checks to write essentially a propositio, which was a claim, and then a partitio, which was a breakdown of what the different reasons or talking points you were going to go over in your essay. So, like I said, this is just really old school terminology that we still use today in modern argument. Then we have our confirmatio and refutatio. The confirmatio are our positive proofs or our evidence in support of our claim. And then the refutatio, the negative proofs, are the counterclaims that our responsibility is to come back and refute. So we want to make sure in an argument we acknowledge that there's another side of the argument, but what's more important about that is that we come back and we refute those counterclaims in order to strengthen our own argument. And then finally we have the peroratio, which is the conclusion, and ideally the call to action. So this is where you wrap up your argument. You might go back and review some of the things that you've addressed, but most importantly, the call to action or the recontextualization of your argument for maybe a larger context. This is where if you think about it, this is the last thing that your audience is going to read. So this is where you want to leave a really strong impression. Okay, so the mind map is something that some of you may have used before. Others of you may have not. This might be something new. But I really like this organizational model because I think that what's really nice about it is that you put little pieces together to make something bigger. So it's kind of like reverse analysis, because when we analyze things, we break them apart and we look at those small pieces. And here we start with our small pieces and then we bring them together to make something bigger. So what a mind map looks like for classical argument is this. And I know there's a lot of information here, but if we kind of go from the middle out, it'll make a lot of sense in terms of what this particular strategic model is trying to do. So at the very center, and I know this isn't centered on the page, but I had to make a lot of room for a lot of the other stuff that's going on here. I'm going to use my little pointer. This is pretty cool. Come on, pointer. There we go. So at the center here, we have our topic or our prompt. So this is the question. This is not your claim. Okay, this is the question you are being asked. Now, why it's really important to make sure that this center node, and that's what we're calling each of these little bubbles is a node. This center node is the topic or the prompt because this is the anchor for our whole argument. So you want to make sure, especially when you're looking at an AP prompt, you know exactly what that topic or prompt is. I'm going to direct you to some videos on a website called Fiveable, which is a typically paid website where students can subscribe and teachers can subscribe, and they give a lot of really valuable video lessons on ways to get a 5 on any of your AP tests. And right now they're offering all their services for free because they know students are at home and they want to do well on this test. And there's a lot of online service providers in education that are really being generous right now. So I'm going to direct you to that. And the reason why is because in one of the videos I was watching of theirs, they talked about why it's so important to understand exactly what the prompt is asking you to do. Now, when I say to you, one of the 3 prompts that you are going to be writing for the AP test is an argument prompt, a lot of times our minds go to, a pros and cons, taking a position on a specific question. But sometimes an argument is more than that. Sometimes an argument asks you to not necessarily take a side, but evaluate the pros and cons. And ultimately, once you've done that, you're probably going to land on a position. But the major point of that prompt, for example, if it's asking you to evaluate pros and cons, is to pay particular attention to both the benefits and liabilities of a specific question. There's one, for example, called the Peter Singer solution to world poverty. And in his solution, his whole thing is we have a tremendous amount of wealth in the world and we have a tremendous amount of poverty. And his solution to world poverty is the idea that there are enough resources in the entire world that if everybody just took what they needed and no more than that, and we redistributed everything that people didn't need to those who did need it, we could solve the problem of world poverty. Now, that's obviously a really controversial topic because on one hand, logistically, it seems to make a lot of sense. But of course, we know that opens up a lot of other arguments with regards to, the value of earning, the value of work, what our responsibilities are to each other as human beings. And so it's really, I love that prompt so much because it invites so much discussion. But when I show you the prompt, which I will in a few days, you'll notice that the prompt is not asking you to take a position on whether or not people should do that. It specifically asks you to weigh out the pros and cons. So your gut might automatically tell you, like, I disagree with this. But what your brain should automatically do at that point, though, is remember that I'm writing an essay about this, and the essay is out, and the prompt is specifically asking me to evaluate both the pros and cons. So I am allowed to talk about why my gut tells me that this is wrong, but I'm also responsible to talk about, or I'm also responsible for talking about, the positive outcomes of this, or maybe the positive elements of this specific solution. So, like I said, you may have strong feelings about your prompt, but you want to make absolutely sure you are answering the question that the prompt is asking you to answer and not just saying, well, I'm going to turn this into the essay that I want to turn it into. Do that on your own time. By all means, go ahead, write an editorial. I think it was in the New York Times, maybe write an editorial to them, do a video blog post about it, whatever, I don't care. But for the purposes of that specific essay, your job is to operate within the rules that are laid out for you right up front, which is evaluate those pros and cons. Okay, so back to our topic and prompt. So the reason why I was talking about all of that is you want to make sure you know exactly what your prompt is asking you to do. Then what you'll do is before you even start writing down any of your thinking is you're going to put down these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes, And you're going to label them all using that Latin nomenclature that we talked about in our classical argument lesson. Okay, so this is all stuff that, doesn't require a tremendous amount of brain power. You're really just sort of copying information from one place to the next. Okay, now what you've done is you've set up an organizational model where you have 6 nodes now coming off of this one, and you can isolate each of these nodes and you can think about them individually. Okay, when we sit down to write an essay and we try to write it stream of consciousness, or we try to start with sentence 1 and just work our way through to the conclusion, what we're doing is we're thinking about all of these things at the same time, and that's really, really challenging. Some folks can do it. I'm not going to deny. Some folks can absolutely do that. They know how to, they have a really, really refined filing system within their minds, and they are able to compartmentalize information and store it for later and be strategic in their thinking. Like, some people can just do that, and that's fantastic. I would venture to guess that most of us cannot, however, which is why having a plan is really, really important. So what you're going to do is you're going to isolate each of these elements, and you're going to build nodes off of that. So your narratio is basically going to be one node. You could do additional, but this is where you are going, I jumped ahead. We'll do exordium first. This is the one that's pretty much one node. You can look in your 8 ways to introduce an essay lesson that I'm going to give you very shortly, and build this node pretty quickly. The narratio, of course, is where you're going to provide context and background. This is step 2, and you might want a couple of different nodes here, just depending on how much distinct information you're going to provide there. The third node is where we're really going to dig into the structure of our essay. So our propositio is, first of all, that's our claim. So you're going to write your position statement. That's going to go in this node up here, your thesis. It's a 1 or 2 sentence statement that very clearly articulates what your position is on the specific prompt that you're being asked to respond to. Then the partitio are those reasons or talking points that you are going to use essentially as your body paragraphs, and you are going to list them in 1, 2, 3 or more nodes. Okay, I would suggest using more than just one reason, 2 at the very minimum, in a timed essay, which I'm anticipating on the AP test this year, which I'll talk about at the end of this lesson, is pretty much going to be one essay, 45 minutes long. It's either, my guess is going to be argument or rhetorical analysis. If it's argument, you really probably only have time to really fully flesh out 2 reasons. Okay, so you write down your thesis, you write down your reason 1, reason 2. Now you'll notice that I have these pink dotted lines that are taking us from our partitio to our confirmatio. That is because these reasons that you posted here are going to be the topic sentences for your body paragraphs, okay? So confirmatio is where you are going to provide the evidence and commentary in support of your claim. So you want to make sure that these are reasons that support your claim, and you have factual, statistical, ethical evidence from expert sources that is going to be used to help bolster these reasons and bolster this overall argument. Now, where the readers are looking for your thinking is in the commentary section, okay? How you explain your evidence, how you show how it logically connects back to your claims, this is how you show your line of reasoning. So, I went ahead one. So the commentary is really, really essential. The strength of your writing really comes here. The strength of your organization comes in, all of this other stuff, but this is your voice here. Okay. This is where your thinking, shows up. After that is your refutatio. Don't skip this. Okay. Don't think that you're going to write a really well-developed argument essay without acknowledging counterclaim. If you think you're going to, you're wrong. All right. You have to talk about opposing viewpoints to have a really strong argument. So your refutatio, again, is where you're going to introduce your counterclaims, and most importantly, you're either going to concede or refute those counterclaims. Now, if you don't remember what conceding or refuting mean, you need to go back and look at the previous lesson, because I very, very clearly explained what those things were. So what does this look like? You start with your counterclaim. Maybe one counterclaim. For every counterclaim, you're going to kind of want to do this model right here. So what the opposition says in response to your position, what is the evidence that they're using to support that? What is your rebuttal to that? How are you responding to these counterclaims? Are you conceding or are you refuting? And then what evidence are you using in support of your concession or your refutation? And finally, in your explanation, just like down here, where you explain how your evidence logically refutes the counterclaim. One question I get is, should this be its own paragraph? Not necessarily. I have rarely seen a really strong argument essay from a high school junior where an isolated counterclaim argument makes for a stronger argument. The stronger essays tend to have counterclaim and rebuttal built into all the body paragraphs. So you can sort of blend these two together. So for example, if reason one for your first body paragraph, if you can think of a counterclaim for that, maybe you want to introduce that essay, or I'm sorry, that paragraph with the counterclaim, and then spend the remainder of that paragraph essentially dismantling that opposing argument with your evidence, facts, statistics, quotes from expert sources, and your commentary. So, like I said, maybe introducing your body paragraph with the counterclaim, and then spending the remainder of that paragraph essentially dismantling through concession or refutation the rest of that original counter argument. Finally, the end is your peroratio. This is where you will build the framework for your conclusion. Remember that you want to make sure that you tie up everything that you've talked about. So your claims, your reasons, perhaps address the opposing viewpoint and explain how you were able to successfully refute it. And then finally, that call to action. And what you have here, by the time all is said and done, is a really, really solid plan for a fully fleshed out argument essay. So before you even get into writing any argument essays, I would like you to spend some time working through doing some of these mind maps. And your first one, take as much time as you need, okay? And I'm going to give you the prompt for the first one. Again, this is all unscored work. The purpose of all of this is for me to give you all of the lessons I would have given you anyway, because I want you prepared for this AP test. So whether you do it or not is completely up to you. I highly suggest that you do the work. If you have, classmates or friends who you are still in contact with, if you could block out an hour in an entire week to, exchange your mind maps and have a conversation about them and talk about, how you arrived at the conclusions you arrived at, or whatever it is you did, that's going to be where real strong learning goes. That's really Socratic in nature, and that's going to be really helpful to you. Me sitting here giving you all these lessons is just the groundwork. The actual work that you do is going to be the difference. Okay. So I have included some examples, and these are also posted in Google Classroom, so you can open them up and zoom in on them and look a little bit closer. These are from Mr. Jiraki's class over at El Diamante. He did this lesson just a week before I did, and so we were still just finishing up deductive and inductive reasoning, logical fallacies, and so that's why I had to go a little bit later than him. But they looked at a couple of different prompts. In this one, are millennials okay in the workspace? And this one is Trump's immigration policies should end. This person did a really nice job of writing the prompt here. This person put a claim here. They should have probably started with a question, and then in their propositio, this would have been their this would have been what they would have put there for their claim. Regardless, you can see that they started with those nodes from the classical argument notes, and then they built off of those. Now, the feedback that Mr. Jaraki got from these students is that, unlike you all, they had started doing the state testing, and a lot of them were saying that they were using this for the state testing, and they felt much, much more prepared to do the actual writing than had they not done this. So, this is a really, really good, like I said, a really good model. And if you like it, by all means, use it, practice it a lot, get really fast at it. Okay. This will carry you through all the way through college, especially when you are writing longer research pieces and you have a ton of information that you are responsible for keeping track of. I used this when I was doing my master's work because I was writing, research papers where I had to have a minimum of 10 resources. And it's really hard to keep track of all of that information, because you've got, all these copies of papers or digital copies and you're sorting through and flipping through. But if you have a good system, it'll help speed up that whole process. So, like I said, I like this a lot. I recommend using it a lot. Some people like using an old school traditional, like hierarchical outline model with Roman numerals and numbers and letters. That works too. The idea behind this is that you have to do what works for you. But if you try to write one of these essays without having a plan before you begin writing, you're really going to struggle, okay? Because you've got a lot of things to keep track of, the logic, the coherence of your argument. But along with that is they're looking for sophisticated academic writing. So the time that you're going to be spending thinking of using the exact precise word is going to be just more time that is, less time that you have to complete the essay. So if you have a plan and you know what you're going to do first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, it's definitely going to be helpful. So the Now You Try, the prompt that I'm having you practice with first, and some of you may have already done this, I think that this is great. I like this one. This is from 2006. I think it's as appropriate now as it was then. It says, from talk radio to television shows, from popular magazines to weblogs, ordinary citizens, political figures, and entertainers express their opinions on a wide range of topics. Are these opinions worthwhile? Does the expression of such opinions foster democratic values? Now, there's two different questions here, and they are very different, but these are guiding questions, okay? This is not what the prompt is asking you to answer. So that's something that you have to be really careful of. You don't want to fall into that trap. The question that you're being asked to answer in the essay almost always follows the phrase, write an essay. So you are going to talk about these things in your essay, but specifically the prompt that you're being asked to answer is to write an essay in which you take a position on the value of such public statements of opinion, supporting your view with appropriate evidence. Now, the value of such public statements of opinion really aligns with this question here. Are these opinions worthwhile? This question, does the expression of such opinions foster democratic values, is not baked into this prompt, but it's definitely something to think about. And just to sort of clarify what this question is asking is, when we think about the fact that right now, because of the way that media works, more people have the ability to speak their minds to a wider audience than they ever have been able to in the history of information. Okay, digital media, social media, everything that we have, we can reach huge numbers of people. Okay, and the first question is are all of the opinions, because of this, this huge amount of dissemination of information, worthwhile? Like, are all of these opinions worthwhile? But the second question is the one that really complicates the whole thing, which is, does the expression of such opinions foster democratic values? And when we think about democracy, we think about the idea that one person has a voice. Okay? Every single individual has a voice. And that's what democracy is supposed to be. What the unintended consequence of that is, of course, is that not all people tell the truth. Not all people say things that are valuable. Not all people say things that are safe. Some people say things that are dangerous. And is it right to censor those people, for example? Is that undemocratic? And so we are opening up a kind of a Pandora's box with this question, because it does really open up a lot of other discussions, like, is censorship okay? Or should we allow everybody to say exactly what they think? And has allowing everybody to say what they think been beneficial to our society, or has it been harmful to our society? So there's a lot of different things to think about, and really spending some time exploring this, just in conversation, you can go all, down all kinds of different rabbit holes. But that's not the business that we're in right now. The business that we're in is this. So you've got to establish a position, and you've got to identify reasons, and you've got to find evidence in support of those reasons, and you've got to address counterclaims. So while this would be a really, really fun conversation to have in class, we're not able to do that, which kind of sucks. I mean, it totally sucks, because I really enjoy that part of class. But what it does force you to do is really focus in on what exactly your position is and how you're going to develop that argument. So that's going to be your task for the next couple of days. And I would just suggest, if you want to, take a picture of your mind map and upload it. Do it on paper. Don't do it digitally, because when you take your AP test, which is, if you haven't read my last update, most likely going to be at home, you're going to want to be able to work very quickly. Now, so far, what we know about the AP test is that it's one free response question, not 3 free response questions and 40 to 50 multiple choice questions. So it's one free response question in 45 minutes. Now, just using some logical reasoning there, the free response questions are typically suggested time of 40 minutes per essay, with the exception of synthesis. Synthesis is a suggested time of 55 minutes. So I'm assuming that because of the truncated amount of time, that pretty much eliminates synthesis as one of our options for the AP test this year. I'm still going to go over synthesis with you before we take the test, because I think it's important for you to know how to do that anyway. We've already done a little bit of source-based argument writing anyway, but we'll look at it a little more closely. So that leads me to the conclusion that your AP prompt, AP test is either going to be rhetorical analysis or argument. Okay. And I'm keep going back and forth on which one of those two it's probably going to be. Right now, as we speak, I'm currently leaning towards rhetorical analysis. If it's rhetorical analysis, you have your rhetorical analysis Bible. Okay. You have that rhetorical analysis Bible. You are allowed to use that, which on one hand is a great thing, because it will really help you. And I know that you like using it. A lot of you have asked to use it multiple times. You can also look at the rhetorical précis in terms of maybe how to write an introductory paragraph. But the only drawback to that is that it's really, really easy to lose 20 minutes looking at your rhetorical analysis Bible or your précis models. So what I would suggest is, if you're asking how to study for the test, just spend a lot of time going through the pages of that rhetorical analysis Bible and that rhetorical précis model days before you take the test. Supposedly there's going to be 2 test dates. I don't know what those are yet. As soon as I get more information, I will make sure that you get a hold of that. But in each case, it's not on demand. It's not take it when you want. There are very specific times, and you have to take it at those times. Okay, and if you miss those times, if you miss those windows, then you lose your money more than likely. In the event of technical difficulties, I'm sure that there's some sort of protocol that the College Board has where you will just submit to them like, hey, this is what happened with my computer. My internet was bad. What can I do? Because honestly, they are working very, very quickly to find solutions for you because they want to make sure you have this opportunity. In the event that it's argument, that the test is argument, you have your mind map model, okay? Which is why I think that you should spend the next week or so mind mapping out prompts. I'm going to upload the booklet that I had printed out for you that I was going to give to you, which has all of the prompts from previous AP tests, okay? That way you can go through and you can be selective about which prompts you want to try. I do recommend trying lots of different prompts. Some of them will just be a quote and ask you to, develop a position on that quote. Others will be maybe a specific dichotomy or a specific event or something going on in our culture, kind of like the one that I'm giving you today. But try different kinds of prompts and mind map them. Now, like I said, for the first one, take as much time as you need. For subsequent ones, I say set a timer and challenge yourself to complete your entire map in under 15 minutes. Okay? If you complete your map in under 15 minutes, you have a really solid plan for writing, and now you have 30 minutes to write your essay with a strategy right there in front of you. Okay? If you find yourself trying to, as you're writing, wanting to deviate from your map and maybe start doing I've got new ideas. Don't write down new ideas. Okay, that's for long form writing. That's for long form research writing where you're going to be doing multiple drafts. This is a 45-minute essay game, and you've got to complete that essay within 45 minutes to have a chance of winning that game. Okay, so try the mind map. First one, take as much time just to familiarize yourself with it. I will upload all of those other prompts. I am going to put together a booklet of all of the rhetorical analysis essay prompts from the previous tests as well. That way you can bust out your rhetorical analysis Bible and maybe develop some plans for how you might plan out rhetorical analysis essays in the event that the AP test is a rhetorical analysis test this year. So, with that, I will conclude this lesson. I really, really miss you guys a lot. It's been really nice being at home with my family. It's been nice being at home with the baby. My oldest we're having a great time. Taught her how to play chess the other night. That was super fun. But a really, really important part of my day is being in the classroom with all of you. And I really miss it. I miss having those conversations. I miss answering your questions and asking you my own questions. So I'm hoping this thing will be over soon. I'm hoping we can all be back together before the end of the school year. Whether or not that's the case, I'll be around, and don't hesitate to say hey or ask a question, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. So everybody be well, stay healthy, and I will talk to you soon. All right.